Okay, guys, welcome back to creativevfx.net. So, this is the final chapter in the basic series tutorial, and this time we're gonna talk about rendering. So, you have done all your work, you have finalized all your assets, you have done all your effects. Basically, you've done all your post production. Now you want to export it. So that means in After Effects you want to render it out. You could also export it. You can use Adobe Media Encoder. Um or you can just render it through After Effects itself. So you have this add to composition, add to Adobe Media Encoder queue, or you can add to the render queue. But for this lesson, we're gonna talk about the render queue in Adobe After Effects. We can talk about Media Encoder another tutorial. So I have a composition here. It's called All Comps. Basically, this is just a templates series for Video Hive. And what I want to do is go to my render queue. You go to make sure all comps is selected. Go to composition, and then choose add to render queue. Right now in my render queue, I have a tab here next to my all comps. If I click on the render queue, it's empty. So go back to all comps, composition, and then add to render queue, and automatically it pops up the render queue. And here it is. Here are the 4 settings you have. So a good thumb rule is that when you're ready to render a composition, then you should always make sure to open it with its comp or timeline plan selected, just as I showed you before. That's a general thumb rule. Another thumb rule also to remember is that whenever possible, you should definitely determine your output format before starting a project. Then you can build your compositions, or at least your final composition, with the size and frame rate in mind. The good thing about After Effects render queue is also that you can actually create templates. And templates are great because then whatever parameter you put in that template regarding frame rate, output, codecs and all that, you can save that, so you can use that template every time. If you have a specific desired output format, then you can use that template. So the general or the default best settings is also a good option. Let's go through that now. We click on best settings, then it pops up this render settings dialog. And basically, the ultimate question every time regarding rendering is, which format should I render to? This is one of the most common questions among After Effects users. There's no simple answer, but we can give you some guidelines. By mean that your first choice should always be to give the client what they want, of course. Ask what format they would prefer, and then chances are good that After Effects supports it, because it really supports a lot of different formats. And this may include QuickTime or AVI movie, or even an image sequence. QuickTime and AVI come with a set of standard codecs, and codec is basically a compressor or decompressors, or coder or decoders, if you mind. If you or your client will be using a specific video card, it most likely requires its own non-standard codec. The installation software that comes with the card will install the necessary codec. Just keep that in mind. When we talk about sequences, then keep this also close to you, that QuickTime or AVI movies are handy because they wrap up all of the individual frames of a movie into a single file. However, there are occasions when an image sequence is the better choice. Some 3D software packages and high-end video systems, such as the Autodesk Flame, prefer sequences. Several options, such as TIFF, SGI, or PNG sequences, are lossless. That means it contains data compression to reduce the file size, offer alpha channels, and support more bits per color channel. To render a sequence, select the desired file type from the format pop-up at the top of the output settings dialog. The word sequence will follow in the file. So while we have this render setting open, quality, you want the best quality, so this should always be at best. Resolution, you might have in your all comps, you might have set it to half resolution. Then it would make sure that this one is set definitely to full, because otherwise you'll get the wrong output. Your size would be the same as your project file, the all comp, which is full HD. And then disk cache, I would put it on the read only. I haven't put any other settings, But this basically will just help sometimes, depending on which format you set. It can help speed up loading of the files. So proxies, these would be useful if we were using a specific template. So proxies means that you can go in and, for example, render it out in a half resolution and use it in your comp while you're still working. So that might also be that you render out in the middle of your work. You would render out because you have tons of asset, like you saw in my file before. When I have so many things going on at the same time, it actually hogs on your RAM system, so your computer really lags. So that would be a good option to some of your assets, some of your layers in your timeline, to actually render those out if you're not gonna add more effects to them. Effects, we just go with current setting, which is already all as on, so that will just be current setting or all on. Solo switches, current settings, I don't have any layers with the solos on. Guide layers, I don't have any guide layers. Guide layers is that, for example, if you want to put a layer which will not be rendered out, this guide will only be, for example, for your client's view. So when you send out a template file for them, you can instruct them through a guide layer how to make any modification to the template or file by using this, by enabling a guide layer. And guide layer as a default will not be rendered out, so even though if you forget to remove the layer from the timeline panel, it will not be rendered out. Color depth 8, 16, 32, these are pretty standard. And then time sampling on for check layers, and I don't have any time sampling on mine, so if I had, it would be on for the check layers. And the same thing with the field render, I put it off. I record most of my clips with either my cell phone or my Sony camera, Full HD camera, digital. So I don't worry too much with the upper fields or lower fields. Motion blur on for check layers. I don't have, but if I had, it would be on. Time span, work area only, or the length of the comp. But I always let it be on the work area, which means, let's go back here. The work area, you see these handles with the blue handles? This whole gray bar here is the work area. So that means just the whole work area will be in there. Go back to base settings. Frame rate, we go back. You can see our project and the frame rate here. We say composition. Let me go back. Composition, comp settings, and we have a frame rate of 25. Let's go back to our base settings and use comp frame rate 25, or you can use this frame rate and change the value here if you want it. And then you can customize the start, end, and the duration of the whole clip. So these are settings, as we talked about, good at leaving them at the base settings. Hit OK. Then output module. If I twirl down the arrow here, you can see where it's going to output to and which format is currently selected, and also includes the output audio settings. So click on lossless. It's going to come up with this output module setting. Okay, so with the output module setting here in the format, choose which format, and as we talked about earlier, depending on really if you're working for a client, what output does the client actually want it in. And the most standards are AV or QuickTime movie. But recently if you want going for the image sequence, which has another compression, the TIFF or PNG sequence, I would go with that. Those are pretty good. So for this one, we will just choose the QuickTime. Post render action. Here you have three options. You can choose to, after the render is complete, you can choose to import it directly into the project panel, import and replace the comp, or you can use a proxy. Video output channels, RGB. You can use alpha or RGB and alpha. If you had any alpha in there, any transparency, I would have chosen RGB and alpha also. Depth, if I choose RGB and alpha, I would choose million of colors plus. And the color is just pre-multiplied matted, and this is just a standard starting point. This is really related to your footage, where you can, from the very beginning, you can interpret it. The format options, this is really to your own liking, to your own tweaking. You can play around with this. Format option right now is set to animation. If I click on this, and here you have multiple choice of which video codec you want to use. Right now it's set to animation, which actually works pretty good for my liking with an QuickTime movie. Otherwise, I could have gone with the H264 or even the TIFF. So these are really, you have to Google them and learn about these. Okay, let's close. And then the same thing with the basic video settings. If you go in and change something in there, you can also alter that. Crop, if you need any cropping or resizing, those will be these options here. We don't need that, so we leave that. And then the audio output, I mean, I just leave it as it is standard. So 48,000 kilohertz, 16 bit, you can change the bit channel here, stereo to mono, and then go into the format option. You can see you have your basic audio settings, but you really don't have, because you didn't set anything in here. So right now audio output is auto, so that means if you have audio layer on there, it's gonna render that out also. And these are pretty straightforward. Do you want it on or off? So if you had any layer with the sound on and you choose audio output off, then it will just render out without any sound. So we choose format QuickTime and we leave it at the animation. Hit OK. And lastly, what you need to do is output to where do you want to save the file. So desktop, and here it is. So you will just click save, and then we'll click the save, and then what you will do is click this button, render, and it's gonna start rendering. If you click this button, it's gonna queue in the Adobe Media Encoder, so you can actually put it over there. The good thing about if you were working with this is that you could send this whole file with these settings to Adobe Media Encoder and let that handle the rendering, and you can continue working in After Effects. Because if you first click here, then After Effects is gonna lock you during the whole render. And remember, it's rendering full resolution with whatever settings you put over here, so it's gonna take some time depending on the length and the complexity of your work. So just keep that in mind. Also, another great tip here is to remember to, while you're rendering, hit the caps lock on your keyboard, because that will actually not show you render in real time while it's rendering, so that will actually help speeding up the process a little bit. So guys, I think we covered the basic how you render out your movies, your small clips, and just remember also the rendering order in After Effects, that when you render, it's gonna render from top to below. So keep that in mind regarding effects. It's also gonna affect have an impact on how which stacking order you have layered the effects in each layer. Just remember that. Otherwise, I would say that's a wrap, and thank you very much for watching the whole series. If you have watched that, thank you, and you should now have a better understanding on moving on to other tutorials on the site or on the internet. So thank you guys for the time. So see you on the other tutorials. Bye.